Berlin Strings is our flagship orchestral strings collection for the Berlin series. It gives you a highly detailed and lush-sounding string orchestra consisting of 5 individual recorded sections, 8 first violins, 6 second violins, 5 violas, 5 celli, and 4 double basses. We chose these slightly smaller than usual section sizes to ensure the highest possible detail in sound and articulation. This is especially important when you want the sections to play divisi parts. At the same time, the sections are big enough to deliver an expansive, lush sound. This sound, which is consistent across all Berlin series collections, is also due in part to the cinematic recording setup we've established at the Teldec scoring stage in Berlin. As well as the opulent sound, Berlin Strings features a wealth of carefully designed and recorded articulations. It's really quite comprehensive, and the articulations we chose to include are all tailored to the idiosyncrasies of the particular instrument, as well as their functions within a cinematic orchestra. So you get plenty of detail, as well as the expressive and slightly romantic sound. That detail begins with the tone and the vibrato options. There are multiple vibrato styles available. You can select and switch styles on the fly with the variation slider on the sign player interface. They're also assigned to MIDI CC3 by default. The various sustain articulations all have their vibrato options, which are tailored to the specific purpose of those long notes. With the soft sustains, for example, you get a progressively developing vibrato. While the standard sustains start right away with vibrato. You get a choice of attack options for the sustained articulations. So all this, together with the huge dynamic range of Berlin strings, means you have a rich palette of colors at your disposal, even just within the sustained articulations. Listen to these examples. Another important feature in Berlin strings is the adaptive legato. We recorded different styles of transitions between notes, which are adjusted and adapted to your playing speed automatically. You can also trigger a portamento transition by using very high velocity values on the target note. By default, only some of the long note articulations have legato transitions enabled, but you can use them on many more. For example, we recommend trying out especially the portato and expressive articulations with legato transitions. Combine them with the different attack options for the sustains and switch between them as you play, and you'll get a powerful tool set for melodic phrasings. Here's how that sounds. So let's move on to the next important set of articulations, the short notes. Here too, Berlin Strings offers you some options to explore. Let's start with the standard articulations and work our way up to the more exotic or experimental ones. Obviously, we have staccato and spiccato. You get at least two different spiccato styles. The standard spiccato are individually recorded spiccato notes. They are very punchy, percussive, and very dynamic. For the spiccato serial samples, we recorded the players performing repetitions, so they sound a little smoother and more connected, especially if you're using them to play note repetitions. As we mentioned, those spiccatos come from longer repetition performances. We also have spiccatos from individually recorded short doubles and triples. These combine nicely with the standard spiccatos, and if you take the more unusual articulations like the staccato bold and martelle bold into account as well, you get a very flexible set of brushes to paint your short notes canvas. Before we move on with the articulations, let's take a look at the mixer and mic positions of Berlin Strings. We have the standard Orchestral Tools Teldex mic setup going on here, just like in all the other Berlin series collections. That means you have the main Decca tree, an A-B mic pair above that, and a surround pair of microphones positioned high and wide. Each section has its own mix of spot microphones. For the first violins, we also set up a special solo microphone for the leader. This is really effective for adding an extra level of focus and definition on the first violins. Let's move on to the expressive longs and portato articulations. We took a brief look at them before, but let's listen to them again in more detail. The expressive shorts and longs have a very distinct attack. In a way, they have quite a pronounced accent, but it's slower and softer than the accented sustains, for example. You can use them to great effect as climaxes in melodic phrases, but they also perform well for very lush harmonic statements. The Portato articulations have a very natural, almost breath-like phrasing. They're great for short chordal statements or slowly moving patterns. You might have already spotted some articulations with the term blurred. These are slightly experimental. What we recorded here was the string section playing out of tune on purpose. This sounds odd, but bear with me. You can use these blurred articulations simply for their own effect, cluster-ish parts, for example. But they're actually intended for a different, very specific usage, namely for very fast and/or difficult-to-perform phrases. The blurred and slightly imperfect sound adds a degree of human error to the sound, which then sounds much more realistic. It's better to show this effect rather than try to explain it. So first, listen to this fast arpeggio and runs passage played with the spiccato articulation. It's nice, but sounds maybe too clean for our purposes, slightly artificial even. So let's add another layer with the blurred spiccatos and balance the dynamics for a good blend of the two. You can imagine the same effect with the staccatos. And if you want your violins on maximum expression on a very strong, long note, it might be useful to blend the blurred sustain together with your regular one for some added effect. Finally, we're getting to the plucked notes. Besides the standard single pizzicato articulation, some of the sections also have additional articulations derived from short phrase performances. Okay, so now we've already heard quite a lot of different examples, but as you can see in the instrument browser, we've only covered the first articulation set for each section. Before we take a look at the other ones, let me quickly mention the full strings instrument. Here, you get a patch of all the sections combined into one keyboard-filling string orchestra with some basic articulations for quick sketching. Very useful. In the second set, you get all the tremolo and trills articulations. Those are all performed and recorded individually. There's no layering or stacking going on here. So not only do you get standard sustained trills and tremolos, but accented and short ones as well. Let's listen to them one after another. The third set covers the dynamic performances of Berlin strings. Here we have a range of different crescendos and swells. There's a really special detail here that deserves a mention. These dynamics can also be played with legato. Enable legato on the swells. They're set up so that you get the standard swell sound starting when you press the first note. Play the second, different note, and you'll get the transition, and after that, the diminuendo part of the swell. That enables you to play some beautiful swelling chords with note changes in between. And on to the fourth set of articulations. Set 4 gives you the tempo-synced 16th and triplet repetitions of Berlin strings. This is how they sound. The two violin sections and the cello also have a fifth set, which is dedicated to octave runs performances. Select your scale, and you can perform up runs and down runs from all the notes of the scale. Use the variation slider or CC3 to choose upward or downward motion. So that's the content overview of Berlin strings. Be sure to check out the single instrument demos on the product website for another impression of the various instruments and sections in Berlin strings. Thanks for watching.